special edition. This time we have 3 industry experts in their fields because they run their own businesses in these fields. The first let me introduce is Stephanie. These are all co-hosts that we've had before, but now there's a particular conversation we're having today. Is Ms. Stephanie Sparks-Smith, who is with Cogwheel Marketing, and she'll be taking on the seat of marketing perspective today. Ms. Lily Mockerman with TCRM and also Thinks Up. But she will be taking the revenue management perspective today. And Miss Holly Zoba, whose audio is better? Nope, can't hear you. But Holly Zoba, who will be the quiet participant of sales with her company, Influencer Sales, she teaches sales training too. With me also is Mr. Edward St. Ange with Flip2. We are the quintessential peanut gallery. But today's topic and conversation, which we're going to turn over the moderation to our 3 panels of experts, is about convergence, the actual realistic convergence between the disciplines in our hospitality industry space, the pains, the positives, and the processes to that end. But first, so that you have a better understanding from their perspective, I'd love to ask, starting with Stephanie, and then going to Lily and then Holly, what is it that your company does? What is a little bit of your background and a little bit more of a kind of a bio of who you are? Stephanie?
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Stephanie Smith here. And I don't always sound like this, but
you sound very smoky today.
So for those listening in only, I don't always sound like this, but it's better than it was. But Cogwheel Marketing does digital marketing primarily for branded hotels. So everything from SEO to paid marketing. And then a lot of what I do, or a passion of mine personally, helping different organizations in training and helping them structure their team. So I think that'll come into play in our different discussions today. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Hi, I am Lily Mockerman. I am the CEO of Total Customized Revenue Management, which you may know as TCRM, because nobody wants to say that name all the time, and also a founding partner of ThinkUp Enterprises, as Lauren was mentioning, which is essentially our consulting division now. We are splitting that out from TCRM. So at TCRM, we handle all things day-to-day revenue management, whether that's task force or long-term engagements, where we're handling day-to-day revenue management for our clients. And then on the ThinkUp side, we have our consultative services, strategic assessments, system audits, technology RFP projects, and a wide variety of other things that touch anything having to do with the convergence of revenue management, sales, and marketing, which is a big focus for us, focusing on moving your profitability upwards and creating sustainable legacies for hospitality companies. So that's what we do.
Your voice? Nope. Oh, I'm going to play Beetlejuice for you. Holly is the principal founder and CEO of Influencer Sales. She teaches amazing content about salespeople developing their sales programs and being better and more efficient at what they do within the sales ecosystem. She also is a past chairperson of the HSMAI's marketing board, previously Digital Marketing Council. And she is going to be doing a webinar series next year with HSMAI on marketing and sales and training for both. And Mitch also is with us, Mr. Robert Cole with Rock Cheetah on the far side. But Holly, you're still your audio list? Right,
Can you sign?
First one. I was like,
what's the sign for sales, marketing, and revenue convergence? That's
so sales loses the conversation today. They fault out.
It's all staged, right?
Revenue wins, marketing's a close second, or marketing wins, revenue's a close second, either or. But I guess from one perspective of it, if you all would like to start the dialogue as to the premise of our conversation today about convergence, what is it and where does it fit into the play? I mean, obviously we have our disciplines. Why are we talking about this?
No one here knows, Lauren. No one knows.
I know.
Because you wanted to. And
that wasn't the question you were supposed to spin out from the beginning, but
yeah, you're doing it wrong, Lauren.
I know.
Dang it. What am I supposed to say? Go ahead.
Lauren don't need no stinking script.
Convergence is really when all of the pieces work together as a whole for a cohesive and well planned out strategy, like not hitting the green button before audio issues are solved or whatever the case may be.
No. Don't make the button green then.
Yeah. I didn't.
That,
Just had to plug
that
in
and
a
then
little.
understanding where each of our departments line in that consumer flywheel and making sure that we have a comprehensive approach to a holistic revenue strategy and right, what is it, right people, right place, right time mentality.
Absolutely. So, Stephanie, I'm kind of curious while we're on that topic. You've brought up flywheel a couple of times, and I imagine some of the listeners may not be familiar with what you mean by that. Do you want to expound on the flywheel?
Yeah, I actually have an infographic I developed about it, but and this is probably where Holly would like to chime in. But when you think about how the old marketing and sales funnel used to be this kind of V-shaped tornado. I like to think of it looking like a tornado, and then you put all of the leads and all the people up here, and then as you go slide farther down the funnel is where you start getting your conversions. But the thought process is it doesn't end with a sale. It doesn't end with someone checking into your hotel. Like, you want to have a continuous cycle in terms of how people, you get people to come back to your hotel. You're looking at your data analytics to make sure that you're getting the right people, the right repeat business and things like that. So it's a continue evolving cycle that doesn't really ever have a start and stop anymore.
Holly, I think I might have actually heard you.
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Just kidding.
No,
Sorry.
didn't hear Holly.
Kidding.
For a second, I
Nope.
thought I heard you, but yeah. So, to expound on that,
I'd even take the laptop audio at this point, Holly, if you just want to yank out the headset
Yeah.
and just play off the audio on that
Right.
and see if that might even work.
But I think when we look at where does revenue management come into that flywheel, marketing and sales have more control over the new exposure and the acquisition piece. And, revenue management is more, or at least is maybe seen as the price person. And they're just at that, that last stage gate of that conversion piece. I don't know if you feel like you have greater impact to the greater consumer cycle or that flywheel, but if other than that one little, at that last stage gate.
I think I think what's most interesting here, though, is with how marketing has changed and where customer acquisition is happening and how that is incredibly trackable these days. Channel mix is something that revenue management does quite a bit of, but has had a hard time when it relates to the direct channel, because historically it's not been easy to understand your actual ability to acquire someone during certain times of need, and what would it cost on direct channel to do that, whereas any of the other channels available to a hotel have a very clear understanding of their ability to fill demand with a cost. And I think with the shifting in marketing and it becoming more data science oriented, on at least in the digital landscape, you're seeing revenue management able to play more of a role in the customer acquisition cycle, and really answer the question of, does it even make sense to attempt to acquire a customer over a specific date range, based on how much it would cost to do that over a direct channel.
Absolutely. And I think that it's really important that, revenue management is sort of involved, in the old funnel approach at both the top and the bottom, but in the flywheel at both the beginning and the end, because ideally your revenue manager should be working with your marketing team and your sales team to determine what are the types of business that we want to go after. What is our target demographic, number one, which many people I think forget. They just kind of go after everything, every type of business that's out there, but really targeting a demographic that works with the vision of your hotel. And then also making sure that you're targeting the right channels. So whether that comes down to revenue management or e-commerce, which these days a lot of people are kind of combining those two things into one, or if it comes down to the marketing side of things, really any sort of digital marketing or things like that need to be targeted to channels where your target demographic is going to see what you're putting out there and what you're doing to try and attract people excuse me, to your hotel. And then at the end of the day, I kind of like to think of it as if you've ever been to one of those froyo concepts where you can put all your own toppings, right? You have to turn the wheel. We've got all of these different pieces of business potentially coming to the hotel as demand, and the revenue manager is kind of turning those dials to see, okay, which business am I going to let in, which business do I need to kind of keep in the background for right now. So there's your Friday morning froyo allegory there. But I think that it's really important that that's kind of the end part of the revenue management cycle, because no matter how targeted your marketing is, you will still get a little bit of everything just by virtue of maybe your location or the fact that people are searching on websites like an Expedia or Booking.com, which don't really give you a lot of opportunities to differentiate yourself, just in a whole list of hotels where it becomes more of a pricing play. So the idea there is that revenue management is allowing in the right pieces of business with whatever demand does come through the door. If that makes sense.
But I have to say, I mean, to Ed's point about the channel mix, that's one that when we talk about, KPIs, and I think one of the opportunities for better convergence is looking at more similar KPIs. I feel like most revenue managers do not look at channel mix. I mean, obviously I do. I don't know, Lily, is that something that you guys have in your regular report outs?
Yeah, actually, we're even trying to take it up a notch, and that's one of the reasons that we formed ThinkUp, to start that conversation a little bit more, because we are thinking up a new way to focus on revenue management, and we want to improve profitability. So we're not just looking at channel mix, but we're looking at profitability by channel. So really helping people measure that through the different types of cost of acquisition. Because another thing we see a lot of right now on the marketing side is, we want more direct bookings as just kind of an automatic assumption, without actually pulling the data to support how much more valuable is a direct booking. Is it even more valuable? We've occasionally, not very often, but we've occasionally had clients where OTA guests are spending 3 times more on property. And so the OTA channel is actually the most profitable channel for them when you look at total hotel spend. But
well, and on top of that, if your life cycle engagement with your clients is not up to snuff,
right,
direct channel business may not be worth any different than OTA business if you're not going to maximize the opportunity of being able to own the relationship.
Yeah, I think everybody's focused on, the acquisition cost and, it only costs me, it's free to book on my site, or it's $4.50, or it's a minimal cost. But once you start throwing in direct booking marketing programs that are pay-per-click or that are different things like that, I think this is one of the areas where revenue management and marketing get disconnected. Revenue management has no idea what the total kind of impact of those costs is, or what the spend is in order to get a guest in the door. And so even if the ADR is $10 higher, in some cases we've seen people throw so many direct booking marketing campaigns out there that they're spending 40% out of the revenue of a guest just to get them through the cheap direct booking channel, and now they're spending twice as much as they would on an OTA. And I do definitely believe that direct booking allows you to own the conversation with the customer, and that's very, very important. But you also have to be analytical, and that's one of the areas where I think revenue and marketing in particular need to be much more integrated and on top of what the other person is doing.
I think Holly's strategy is to just be eye candy today. Holly, if you want to bounce out and try coming back in again and see if that might be a fix for you. Robert made the suggestion maybe not attaching your audio until you come back in, and see if it'll identify the mic at that point.
Yeah, make sure all your Bluetooth stuff is
just shut everything off on it.
Speakers or TVs or headphones, something like that.
Yeah, because just if that might work for us. But anyway, I apologize for the interruption on that. We just would love to get Holly's dialogue on this as well, since she's going to take over the world.
Maybe I would say exactly what Holly would say and cite some Colibri numbers that came out this morning, right? Some interesting stats. Colibri, I love the intent of their work of coming up with, COPE and things like that to figure out what are the total costs involved with distribution. But they had some interesting stats. Actually, we're talking about the cost per occupied room. $2.61, or I'm sorry. On average in October, brand.com channel booking costs were $9.21 per occupied room. So, but that's per that's pretty high. Now you can break that out per reservation, right? So depending on the length of stay, OTA booking costs were $22.43 per occupied room, and property direct booking costs for $2.61. So you've got a pretty big jumps between the three. But a very interesting thing's happening. The headline was kind of, hey, look at this. The brand.com bookings, their share is rising. It's up 7.7%. And OTA is only up 7.1%. So isn't this great that things are shifting more to brand.com? The problem is that property direct is down. So I did a few back of the envelope calculations on a basis point analysis. And basically in October, year over year, brand.com was up 175 basis points. Property direct was down 179. So between the two, that's a net -4 basis points, which is not great. OTAs were up 108.
So I have to take
OTAs
issue.
are building share.
I do have to take issue with the property direct. I would honestly just throw that number right out the window right now, because there's two things that are affecting that. Property direct is only made up of people who literally call, because that is not brand.com, or your actual website is not included in property direct here. So they're talking about people who are calling or emailing, or according to some educational materials I've seen, mailing in a request for a reservation. And so people are outsourcing reservations offsite. So few hotels even have an in-house reservations, and the majority of property direct ends up being rooming lists for rooming list sales groups. So the other thing that comes into play here is that technology where people can upload their rooming lists and whatnot is not necessarily in this metric considered property direct.
Well, but that's not how Calibri's breaking. That's not how Calibri's breaking it out, though, because property direct is 26.6% share, which is a larger share than brand.com, which is at 24.5. Right.
Does that one break out?
Rooming list.
That one doesn't break out group.
Well, no, and then there's other, right, which isn't included, and I don't have the actual break. I have them around here somewhere. Others about 32.6, so that's where certainly a lot of group and corporate is going as well. But the property direct stuff is fundamentally a lot of online things. So my basic gripe has been for all these, hey, look at how great brand.com is doing. A huge proportion of that is purely offline to online shift of direct bookings. Right. And the cost from property direct of 2.6% per occupied, or $2.60 per occupied room, to $9 per occupied room for the owners. This is bad. This is a very, very bad fundamental metrics happening.
And this was a point I was going to make when we were talking about the war for direct bookings. That's not a hotel level war. That very much is a brand war, because the brand was at risk of losing a battle that potentially could greatly lower their ability to charge how much they charge for franchise fees. If Marriott and Hilton lose to Expedia as the favorite for travelers, that takes a big gouge out of what they're offering as a sales pitch on why to work with that brand. But if you're a direct, if you're a hotel that, controls your own destiny, the direct booking battle isn't, you're getting sucked into it because the brands have pumped it so much and have made it such a big issue. But quite honestly, balance is really what you should be concerned about. You shouldn't be overspending to get direct business. You should be looking at the lifetime value of a customer. So you can spend more per acquisition for your direct channel, as long as you have some form of ability to get a better lifetime value out of your travelers than the one stay that you just got. So, I mean, this is where I always caution hotels is don't look at the brands for what you should be doing. If you're not a branded hotel, you shouldn't look at moves that Marriott or Hilton make, because Marriott and Hilton are playing a very different game. And it's not a game that is going to make sense to your bottom line.
Yeah, I think that, it's really important that, again, revenue managers, marketing managers, sales managers across the board, and this comes back to the KPIs and whatnot, you have to be educated on your costs. We're still spending far too much time focused on just top line revenue and focusing on, what's our ADR and what's our RevPAR. Well, those are great. And it's handy that Star benchmarks RevPAR. And I'm sorry that we don't have good benchmarking for profitability or GoPAR yet. But that's what we need to be focused on, because at the end of the day, as I always say it, you can literally revenue yourself out of business. If you're not watching your costs, and I see it the most being upside down when people try to work with deal sites like a Travelzoo or a Groupon, and there is a place and a time for that, absolutely, but they're not taking into effect the margin, or they're trying to throw things in to get onto the top 20. They get onto the top 20, and then they find out that their profit margin on every single room that they've now sold 500 of is negative $15. They're literally paying to have people in their hotel. So it looks good on the occupancy. It might even look good on the star because that commission check gets cut later. But it's important that we're focused on that so we don't get ourselves into those situations and, threaten the sustainable legacy of the hotel.
So,
oh, wow. It's going around. Stephanie, we thought you were going to lose your voice for this meeting, but it turns out it's everyone else.
I know. I thought I heard Holly for like 1 second.
I thought I did
So
too.
did I.
I'm here. Can you
Oh,
hear me?
there we go. Yay!
Oh, turn up the volume. Pump up the volume.
Speak closer to your screen.
So my question is, I was surprised to hear Stephanie say that she didn't think revenue managers paid a lot of attention to the channels. I thought that's all they did. What else do you do?
Well, and I say the channel mix as a whole. So I feel like most of them that I work with, and I don't work with many or any of Lily's revenue managers, but in terms, they're like, they look at Expedia and Booking.com as channels, but they're not, but they couldn't tell you, like if this best available rate came in through, a website or something else. I mean, at least in the majority of the branded hotels that I work with, they couldn't give you that breakdown if you asked for it.
I'll have to echo that from the fact of the Rocket program. One of the questions I always ask the group when they're assembled is, can you tell me what your percentage of direct channel contribution is? And the second question is, can you define what's in that channel? And neither question ever gets answered. They don't know. So how do you even know what to expect from those channels or that channel if you don't even know what its contribution value is? Because a Pinto can't win the race, if it doesn't have enough percentage contribution to even be worth, expanding on. So I'd say that is a problem within the industry.
In defense of typical revenue managers across the country, I will say that there's increasingly a lot on their plate, and sometimes it is difficult to find the right balance of time to dig into those numbers, especially this time of year. We see sort of a quarter four crisis. I swear our revenues would all be better in quarter four if the revenue managers didn't have to spend 25 hours a week working and reworking budget numbers in order to satisfy a political agenda in many cases.
I thought that's what the salespeople were doing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of
marketing.
And as well as the marketing people.
Yeah.
Well, and Holly, I would ask the same thing. Like if I'm talking to a sales manager and they say, oh, we have, this big corporate account, whatever, ABC, and they can't tell me how a lot of times they can't tell me where that account books. Is that account using the link that you send out and pick up group? Are they using GDS? Are they calling in? Like, I feel like do you feel like you have that data readily available from a sales standpoint either?
Heck no.
Well, this brings to one of the questions that we brought into discussion early on was, who should be asked what question? Okay, so we have the three entities in conversation now, and all of you had the gripe of, we're always doing this recycling of information within our own discipline. Like, we're always being asked the same questions for what we have, but are the right questions being asked of the right department? And is that question being asked in front of the other departments as well? So there's a collaborative answer rather than a siloed answer. What do you think would be an optimum way of approaching what you all agree is the same problem?
Well, I think I'm going to have a different perspective just because of the world that I work in. I mean, I think marketing being the quote unquote newest of the three disciplines, sometimes my counterparts in revenue management or sales don't really understand the tools that I have in my toolbox to be able to align our strategies together, first and foremost. Number two, there isn't a lot of consistency across marketing managers. There's very differentiating skill sets, I think, across marketing teams. So when we think about who leads that conversation, I feel like the ownership is on that marketing person to insert themselves and be able to educate the sales and revenue team so that we can, hopefully align. But I don't necessarily feel. I think you guys can fight out kind of who's leading the charge in terms of who's the owner of that discussion.
But why does it have to have one specific owner? Why can't it be set up in a way? And forgive my absolute ignorance here. I've never had the pleasure of working at a hotel. I've always served hotels. But I do ask the question of, why does it have to be one specific owner? Why can't it be more entrepreneurial where everyone who would have a vested interest in knowing has the ability to understand without having to go to a person? Like, why isn't revenue management being trained in on marketing tool sets as marketing is being trained on those tool sets? Why is there not cross training in these specific verticals?
There should be, without a doubt, there should be. But I do actually think somebody needs to lead it because communism doesn't work. You've got to have everybody. You've got to have an owner of it. But as I started thinking about sort of how I evolved, I have known sales and marketing need to combine for a long time. I've been resistant to revenue management because you guys really think so much more differently than salespeople, and marketing sort of is a little bit in the middle. And so sometimes I don't want anything to do with revenue management because I joke that we should embrace the nerds when I talk about marketing, but really you are so nerdy in the revenue management world. It is just night and day. But as I have gotten into this, I can't believe the amount of work that we're so inefficient. We do so much rework that each other discipline does that it's nuts. No wonder we can't get anything done. It takes us 6 months to do budgets. So I really do think somebody ought to step up. And I always believe it should be the person closest to the customer. So whatever your organization is, the person who has the ear of the customer and is the customer advocate, I think should be driving all three areas, which I think eventually will dissolve probably into just two, the analyst, and then for lack of a better word, the creative, I guess. But
wow, I heard myself very loudly.
Yeah.
The thing I think that's important to understand, and this is where I do think hotels could benefit by looking out to their vendor relationships to see how they function. Because, by the way, all of these issues exist in any business. How you align them, how you have a culture of transparency. If you look at some of the best startups or even functioning tech companies in this space, transparency is a big part of it. So if you ever wanted to ask me a question about anything that's going on with one of our partners, I can go into our CRM and I can see every interaction that's happened, no matter who in the org that partner spoke to. That didn't come easy. It was something we had to ingrain in the organization, and it's ingrained for transparency purposes. It's so ultimately we can serve our partners' needs, which requires everyone to know what's gone on since the day of first contact. Well, first contact for us is prospect, where we're prospecting you. You have full account history. Anytime we bring on tool sets that are data-driven tool sets, we cross-train so that anyone who has interest, for whatever reason their interest exists, They know how to go and get data. Then if they have questions on the data, they can go to the expert who oversees that specific tool set or project to ask those questions. But transparency, I think, is incredibly important. And Tammy in the chat
Yes, thank
talked
you.
about this new trend of chief commercial officer. One of the things that I have noted in all the years I've worked with hotels is hotels lack vision from the top. Most hotel employees that I talk to, when I ask them, why do you exist? Why are you here? Who are you trying to get to stay with you? There's no answer. And to me, that is a lack of vision being communicated down. Now, someone somewhere in the hotel may have that vision of why was this building built? And why did the decision get made that this should be temporary housing for people who are traveling to the area? But that was thought about at some point. And that vision of what you are as an entity, what is your personality as a business, what is everyone's goal? Because no matter what your sub goals are, you should have one goal as an organization that everything else answers to. Every department should understand the one goal. And if that's not happening, you're never going to break silos. You're never going to be able to function in a healthy manner if everyone's not rowing in the same direction.
Well, just to go backwards on something, I'm sorry, Sammy, just for real quick.
Well, the challenge is.
Hold on a second, Robert. Hold on a second. Just so we don't talk over each other. Sorry, I just want to add one comment to this part of it. So you have to look at the history. The answer to something Ed's pointing towards. The history of all the disciplines we're talking about today came from a different place. Sales is the only one that's still probably most truest to form. But revenue management came from reservations. Marketing didn't even exist, as Stephanie pointed out, because it was an offshoot. And when
it existed, it was just under the
No,
yeah,
no,
not in the form that it is in now.
Disagree.
But to your point,
because the word was there, Holly, doesn't mean it existed.
But to your point, when it comes to sales, was burdened with unnecessary requirements as this internet thing started blowing up. They were dumped on because they were the only ones that weren't rolling tables into banquet rooms or fixing plumbing or changing beds or checking people in. That they were like, oh, you have an overview of the whole hotel, so handle this marketing stuff, which was absolutely in polarity to what the responsibilities were, which was group sales. And now they're being asked to promote transient sales, which is diluting their ability to sell. So they're not exactly an advocate of what they were doing, nor were they embracing it wholeheartedly. And then revenue management, reservations control turned into yielding, that turned into growing, and they were put into the room of don't bother them. Leave them alone. They're figuring numbers out. So they were actually siloed. So Ed, to your point, eventually what we are is now we're parallel tracks doing the same things repetitively or in duplicity to everybody else because we're not creating that convergent conversation of saying, what do you got? I don't know. What do you got? What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? And having that conversation that, you pointed out is what normal companies do. But unfortunately, as we operate, we operate in small little rooms and we don't talk to each other because we like job security and blowing budgets. So anyway.
So Ed, can I ask you a question? Who does your pricing?
Who? You asked me that?
Yeah.
That's actually, it's a group effort.
Come on, communist.
No, it's a group effort. No, by the way, we do have the luxury of, it's not weird for us to ask our partners how they feel about the value proposition of our price versus what we're doing for them.
So
I'm literally,
leading your organization has a sales background.
Well, I have a sales background. But I mean, we are right now we're deploying beta of an entirely new platform, and we're giving it for free for a period of time to certain partners. And when they ask the question of what's this going to cost, I mean, right now the answer is we don't know yet, but it'll be fair.
Right. That's perfect.
And it's going to be a conversation of what did this do for you? How much work did you have to do? How much work did we have to do? What did that cost? And, a profit margin on top of that, but it's a fair profit margin. But that is, I will admit, you can't walk up to your travelers and say to them like, hey, what would you have paid for this? And trust the answer you're going to get.
No, but we can find that out.
But you can to a certain degree, ask the question of how did you feel the dynamic, was between what you paid and what you received, and get some level of usable data out of that. But I will say, we do, when we're looking to price something, we look at what was our hard cost, so what was our development cost of it, what's going to be our ongoing cost to serve it, and then we look at what's the time that's going to be involved in educating the market on this. And, because nothing we do exists. So nothing Flip 2 does existed before Flip 2. Even the new platform we're rolling out now just didn't exist. It's not a recycling. So we can't just go and look and say, well, what's the market charging for this? Okay, we'll work within that. We actually have to fundamentally think through how should we price this? And that also defines how much should we spend developing it.
Well, but Ed has one major advantage over a lot of other groups. You don't have some big, ugly private equity or venture capital investors telling you need to push this higher, faster, make sure you get this. What's the maximum you can get in terms of margin, right?
Right.
So that's
sort of what was driving my question. Ed said, we should look to other industries, and I totally agree in many areas. But most other industries haven't solved the pricing silo.
Well, okay. Let me. What I was going to say before was the hotel industry created this problem themselves. So when you go back to marketing, the original, we're talking 1950s. No, I was not around when Peter Drucker or whoever came up with the 4 Ps. But it was product, price, place, promotion. That was marketing. Price. That's revenue management, right? It was all together. What happened with the hotel industry? Fundamentally technology, right? Which then drove organization, because the big key was reservations fell under rooms division. Why? Because you had a room rack and a little bug. There was like one place where the reservations had to be, and they better be damn close to the front desk so you can see what's going on. Right? What's happening tomorrow? What do we have? So it was purely a logistical, at that point, technological issue of paper and pens, right? Or pencils, actually, and erasers. So that did that. Then you got property management systems, things like that. And basically the sales department, if we're talking, 1980s and, mostly evolved really through the 70s, but 1980s sales department, catering was certainly under the director of sales and marketing, right? It was group sales. It's certainly all the corporate stuff. Everything kind of went through there except for reservations, right? And that was it. And the pricing was kind of set up cooperatively between, the general manager, rooms division manager, things like that. And then you had banquets. Now, banquets for moving table, that was under food and beverage, right? That was operational. Same way that rooms was broken out.
Pricing typically was in food and beverage.
The catering pricing was, yes, of the actual, because that was generated up through certainly the chefs and food and beverage and purchasing, figuring out what the costs were and things like that. So what happened is with these silos, that's why things got broken out, right? Because the sales and marketing department, they started to use Delphi, right? So they were geared more toward, okay, we've got these tools to do sales stuff, and reservations had, their property management system or the CRS that they had to deal with, and all the stuff got siloed. And then revenue management came out and somebody plopped in something in between that was mostly just spreadsheets and stuff like that was pulling stuff from other places. So that's how it was created, and it does need to get unified. And they should be all working together. But the bottom line is, how do you unify the technology and the analytics layer over that so you can get the transfer? That's why Ed's CRM works so well. They've got everything in it. They've got a consistent form where everybody can see it. That's what you need to get to. You need your data stream where people can bolt on their functionality and see what's going on. And share one version of truth, right?
The value in that of having a system of truth is amazing, because it also helps weather employees who maybe aren't doing what they should be doing. It helps you understand employees that are being overworked. Because as a manager, my biggest fear always has been thinking an employee's not doing something and then having to replace them with 3 people. And so a single system of truth helps curtail those extremes. They help you understand when certain parts of your workforce are being stretched while others are being underutilized. And so the actual value of that can't be looked at as just this is just a data play. It's no, this unlocks your ability to function as a business. And function in the modern way of functioning as a business. Being able to actually not have to go to a sales rep and say, what do you think you can do? And instead be able to go to them and say, realistically, this is what you as a person are capable of doing. Your challenge for this year is to find a way to do this much more, which is a reasonable amount more. But it's based in historical understanding of reality. And data can do that.
So Holly, I'm curious, how do you get in sales? How do you define what your quotas or what your year-over-year growth from a sales manager should be?
So how should it be, or how is it done now? I mean, this to me is the biggest joke of all, because the way that we all do it is we come up with a sandbag number that's based on historical and growth in the market and who's moving in, and what our staffing is going to be, and if we're renovating, our customer service scores. And then the owners come back and say, no, you're going to grow 3%, and then we just have to figure out where to allocate that. I mean, but it only takes us 4 months to get to that point. That's the maddening part.
And Lily, when you're doing top line revenue, where do you come? How do you feel like you have the data and statistics to come up with those numbers, and then from a forecast model standpoint?
Sorry, your audio got really weird in there for a second. So do we have the statistics to come up with which numbers?
Like your revenue goals.
Yes, I think that we have the data at our disposal to do a traditional forecast. However, what we can't really take into account is what we're expecting from marketing. And to be fair, that's not necessarily the marketing department's fault.
It's definitely not.
In many cases, like if you're putting out a marketing piece that covers, for example, summer, I imagine most marketing managers are not going to be able to tell me that I'm going to get this many on the 10th and this many on the 11th, and that you really can't break it out day by day, which is what revenue managers should be doing in their forecasting. So you have to make some assumptions there, right? But having clear ROI numbers for different types of marketing initiatives is not something we're typically handed when completing a forecast. So if we know that, we may be doing a marketing push on a package that's purely about SEO. We don't actually expect much conversion on this package, but it's a PR play for some reason. That I know that has a really important place in the marketing program. But for a revenue manager to know which one is going to convert, which one is a PR play, what do we really expect as a return from this in concrete enough numbers that we can include it in the forecast is something that we're typically not given. But the more that I dive into some of these marketing systems, the more I see that the analytics do exist when they're being measured properly. And so by sharing some of those analytics, even though they're a little bit softer than maybe a sales pace or a transient pace would be, it still gives us an idea of how the marketing might influence the forecast so that we're not over discounting on a day where we're expecting the marketing plan to work really well, or, really overestimating the return. I see that happen all the time with budget and marketing plans, like, oh, but we're putting out this marketing in June, so we can expect June to be 150% of what it normally is. Like, this isn't necessarily proven by the numbers. It's not a bad marketing play, but it's not going to make your June 150%. Well,
and this is the big difference when you talk about data sources. The data sources available to a revenue manager versus the data sources available to a marketing manager need to be looked at differently.
Right.
A revenue manager, most of their data sources, that data can be counted on, meaning it is what it is. There is no need to look at it and analyze it beyond this happened at this rate. This is what the costs that were associated with it. Those can all be taken with a fair amount of truth if you have clean data practice. However, when you go into analytics, you have to understand you can't take analytics down to that level of commitment. You can't say because it shows that this happened, this is exactly what will happen again. You need to understand that. You need to look at analytics from a trending perspective, and not take it completely to, oh, I see this piece of data, therefore it tells me I have to do this. It's I see signals, that those signals, when put together, give a trend of this. So when we do this, it creates these signals. These signals can help us make a decision. Because the couple things you need to understand about hotels. Most hotels' analytics, if they're running their own analytics, the data sample's too small.
Right.
So you can actually pollute your decision making by looking at the results of previous decisions, because your data sample is so small on your analytics. Go ahead.
But your data sample is your own guests.
Hold on. Let's accept because
I just disagree with the statement about that your revenue management data is a source of truth, because that data is reliant upon like all of that property data that we talked about earlier, all that property direct data. That assumes that everyone answering the phones and doing everything with the PMS, that all of that data is accurate. And we all know either from rate overrides or for whatever else, like that data, you can't assume that that data is right. Like if you've ever looked at a rate code or a segment and you're like, that ADR isn't where it's supposed to be. And then you go and dive down and you're like, oh, it's because the front desk didn't know where to put this group. So they just put it here, stuck it here, and then did rate overrides the next 40 times someone came in for that group. So I just like to assume that, I mean, it's the best data you have. So you have to make assumption of, but there's absolutely no.
It's way more capable of being used for something closer to a decision than analytics can be.
Okay.
For the average hotel.
I'm not going to disagree with you, Ed, but I am going to disagree with just about everybody. So wait, let's stir the pot. I believe there's a sharper point to the pencil than what we are defining this as for marketing. And I'll give you a real world, this works for me example. Okay. We data layer our website's trafficking so that we know what dates are being discovered when people come to the site. We also know geographically where they're located when they're doing it and the date that they were looking from. That creates us 3 data set profiles. 1, source of interest. 2, lead time of interest. 3, point of interest. Okay. We then throw that into a nice little BI thing like Tableau or something like this, and we graph it out and we see by volume and type. Then we go back into our analytics and determine what channel segmentation is based on revenue that was generated from those markets. Okay. And their length of stays, ADRs, and so forth, and what channels were used to create them. So we know that there was a percentage related to emails, PPC, organic, whatever it is, and we know the conversion values of those channels. We also know how much it costs for us to be in those channels. From the revenue management perspective, they know the rate resistance of those markets from historical data. Mm-hmm. Some people just don't spend past a certain limit based on the geography they come from. It's just a user fact. So we would then calculate what markets we would target, what monies we would need to spend at the conversions we know historically to generate the conversions we know by channel from that market for those dates to generate that occupancy. So yes, I can bring X number of heads in beds at X rate and X dates based on taking that marketing data and applying revenue management's understanding of rate resistance and actually make a forecast or a plan that will generate what I wanted to do at the time. Is it 100% accurate? To your point, Ed, absolutely not, because there's just variations.
Well, I mean, but even with what you're doing, you're using way more dimensions of signals than the average hotel would. So I would say you're much closer to being able to trust the outcome of that. But I mean, just listen to the gymnastics you had to go through to explain what you were doing. I don't believe, and I'm going to use the word believe because my sample may be skewed a bit because I tend to deal more with independent hotels. But I do not believe that the average independent hotel has the level of sophistication on staff to be able to do even anything remotely close to what you just talked about. And the problem is they end up having to farm that out or not doing it at all.
Yes, they do.
Well, no, and the process though, Lauren, those that should be a nearly identical process in sales, right? When you start looking at what's happening in Smurf, what's happening in corporate, what's happening with state associations, national, citywides, all of that stuff, all of those different signals, where they're coming from, where they're going, yes. And you may have a longer time horizon where you're looking at 24 months or 36 or whatever, depending on, what kind of property. If it's a major convention property, you've got to be doing this, quite differently. But you're right. That's the level of detail that you need to layer in. And again, it's the technology and the data sets, because I can safely say in the early 1980s for a 400 room luxury hotel, we were doing that. It was really ugly. We were using VisiCalc Lotus 123. Lotus 123. I'm sorry, we moved up to that. This is pre-Excel. Being able to do our daily report, which broke down exactly what the occupancy was, tagged back to exactly what were walk-ins, exactly what came through reservation, what was call-ins, what came through GDS, because there was GDS back then. Sales department by segment, we had that level of detail. So when we went back, we could go, here are the patterns, and we could even tie it back to here's what the groups were. It was a lot of effort, but we had really great forecasting and could make really good decisions. The problem is now these siloed systems, they don't have a good way to pull all that stuff together, because the Delphi stuff is over there. The revenue management stuff, the Duetto stuff is over there. The CRS stuff is over there. And it's going to take a lot of work to put it together.
Holly's process a little bit on this. What you're doing is you're segmenting out sales strategy, and that's fundamental sales strategy. Okay, I'm going to go after Smurf business. That's a different profile than I am going corporate.
Absolutely.
Holly brings it to a level that it is in training the salesperson to understand the person behind the decision. She teaches people how to communicate with people that have the responsibility of the segment that they're in. And I think that's a defining difference of sales evolution, because the way you're talking about it is the historical way sales looks at their business. They categorize, compartmentalize, and then stereotype the profiling of what they do to dialogue. When Smurf business comes in, who you have to handle differently and hold their hand. Where corporate business is more functional, factual, and data driven. But Holly's and any good sales training program or sales effort in collaboration of what they can contribute to this triad of discovery for convergence is about being able to be better at the deliverables, because you're better at the communication, which is in some ways become a lost art, I think. And I mean, Holly, I'm speaking over you about it, but I mean, is that something like, okay, good. All good.
So I think that, we are never necessarily going to converge until we can all agree that every single department has the exact same problem right now. And that problem is price. Marketing is pushing things out based on price that will encourage people to buy. Revenue management is pricing against the comp set because they want to get people to convert. And sales brings DBRs to revenue management and talks about what prices they're in competition with. Nobody is talking about, as much as they should be, the experience of the guest, the correct target demographic for the hotel. Price is the easiest thing to sell on.
It's the laziest thing.
It's the laziest. That's exactly.
It's the laziest thing. You're right.
My point is that we're all avoiding the key components of our roles because price is the easy thing to fall back on when we're not immediately sure what to do.
And it's the hardest thing to defend against competition.
Yeah,
I do most of my marketing strategies. Like I feel like when we think about the P's, like for my marketing, I don't consider price, like, because that's what I have the least control over. So mine's more about, from a sales and revenue management, which target markets do you want? What segments do you want to go after? Let me align my paid marketing strategies to help you facilitate those efforts, get in front of those people, acquire those people. And it's my job to, I use the analogy with hotels, like if
I do want to know more, but I didn't know I was going to have to press a button.
I know.
I didn't cool. Sorry.
You are going into Stephanie's sales funnel.
Wow. I didn't know you were going to gate your content on this. My gosh.
That was me. I got one for everybody. Just wait for me. I'll pop them all up. Sorry, Steph, I interrupted you.
I know, and I've completely lost my train of thought because I don't know myself anymore.
I'm back because it was good.
You don't
The whole
consider
point
price.
The convergence piece and the price piece. Like I use this analogy, like marketing and sales are bringing the people to the front door. Revenue management has to get them through the price piece to walk through the door of the hotel. Operations is there, to welcome them and bring them back and create that repetitive piece of it. So I agree. I mean, I think price is important, but I try to take it out of my equation because I'm going to assume that you have all the data and you've priced the hotel appropriately against the comp set.
And to be fair,
fair.
just to add to this before you take it to a better place, the reason you have the perception that price is the key aspect of this is actually indicative of a bigger problem in the hotel space, which is lack of foresight of need periods and communicating that correctly to marketing. Good
And that's what I
marketing
was gonna
takes
come back to
time.
as well. Like the forecast though is published, right? The forecast is published. They're generally available to the entire team. So yes, revenue management should take responsibility for going to marketing to collaborate with them on need periods, but it should also be pretty obvious within those reports what the need periods are without having to kind of double up on the revenue manager to communicate it out in multiple formats. But to go back to Stephanie's point, my exact point is price should not be part of the equation with marketing. Marketing essentially is setting the price by not including price in the marketing because they're the ones who are pushing out the value perception, and sales is doing the same thing in my mind, but in more of a conversational with the client piece. We have to be promoting that value. Revenue management then is responsible for it, typically on the OTAs or the direct booking site, to make sure that that's foremost in the equation. What we should be doing, what our jobs are, all three of us, is to take price out of the equation in order to raise the value perception for the guests so that you're not just in a pricing war. And that's going to get so much more important going into 2020, especially because despite the fact that nobody's technically forecasting a recession right now, everybody's treating it that way because the growth is slowing down with all of the extra supply coming into various markets. So people are going to get really nervous. They're going to start reactive pricing. There's going to be some markets where there's probably going to be a race to the bottom. You've got to get out ahead of that now, to Ed's point, because marketing is the long play. You've got to get out ahead of that now so that your guests, your target demographic that wants your specific type of experience, is not focused on whether or not you're the same price as the hotel across the street or $5 cheaper. That is not the way that you should be competing to get guests in the door.
It's lazy.
It's completely lazy. And that comes all the way back to what we were saying earlier. I think it was Holly who said, well, what does revenue management do? Honestly, 70% of revenue managers these days set bar rates.
Right.
And that's about the extent of what they're doing. It's terrible. And that's why we're running into another shortage where, great, TCRM's doing good because there's a lot of task force needed because there's not as many good revenue managers out there right now. But revenue managers are struggling to stay up to date with what's happening in the industry and all the things that they should be looking at, like channel mix, like putting out forward proactive strategies, like not trying to solve this month's revenue because you solved that 3 months ago with the correct strategy. So there's way too much reactivity, I think, at this point, and proactivity and really digging more into the analytics is what's needed. And that comes back to more training, I think, for revenue managers and their willingness to not compete on the lazy area, which is just price.
Well, so here's one other question I have, and I'm more because I'm curious what the inner dynamic is here. But let's say you're a revenue manager and you're seeing a unforeseen soft period developing further out. So you're seeing that maybe you're trending behind in your early markers and looks like it may be soft. Do you go to marketing and say, hey, is there anything you can do that you think would be effective? Could you put together a plan that maybe you think would help shore some of this up? Does that type of communication happen inside a hotel? You're muted. Are you muted because you don't want us to hear it?
Audio again. No, I think sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on your team and how evolved they are, I think, to some degree as well. But it is a conversation that I think should be happening. If that
there was a LinkedIn post that Lily shared the other day, and it said that marketing managers should sit on all the revenue management calls. And while I believe that that's an opportunity for collaboration, I don't want to sit on every revenue management call because that would not be a good use of my time. But I do encourage when you have those scenarios, Ed, that the revenue manager does say, hey, can you just get on, they end up having weekly calls, and most marketing managers may only have, quarterly or monthly calls. So it's a matter of saying, hey, this is an opportunity where probably sales and revenue management are on a weekly call together. Marketing should be inserting themselves and just jumping on that revenue call and say, let's just talk about this specific soft period, create a plan, understand who the opportunities are to segment and to go after, and then try to converge that way. I think there's an opportunity for, I guess, marketing to add themselves, but maybe not quite to the extent of every single revenue management call.
Well, and by the way, the answer to a healthy organization is not sit in meetings all day.
Right.
I hate meetings.
Yeah.
But I was just curious because, I am exposed a lot to hotel email marketing, which is very knee jerk. Kind of across the board. It's also spoken with a voice normally that is very greedy. Most hotel email marketing that I see is about them and what they need, not about what's good. Why should I want to do something with them? I see very little effort being put into educating people who come during one time a year on other great times a year to come to this market and why there's a value there. It all seems very knee-jerk. It almost feels like someone walked up to them and said, we are going to fall short this weekend. Send an email out. Tell them we will give them anything to come here, but send it to everyone. Because that's what I'm seeing in most email marketing is it's need-based only. It's being used very last minute in what it's targeting, which is why I asked this question, because to me, those types of communications should only exist when a group backs out, right? Like I get that there are times that it needs to be but a lot of hotel email marketing these days looks like it's a button that just says, push this button, put a cheap price on it, and make it seem like it's super urgent.
I have a question for Holly, and it's a question about why a question doesn't get asked as much as it should. I mean, we're talking about how revenue management and marketing probably collaborate more than sales does with marketing. Why is that? Why is that? I never have really had any salespeople, unless I've dragged them out of their space and said, ask me how I can help you. I can help you bid business. There's tools and methods and data. I can make your day. Why aren't you asking?
It's really an interesting question. Although there's another question that somebody asked in the chat room. What are some other tools for sales besides Delphi? And Salesforce is one. I have a whole class built around sales tools that have nothing to do with a lot of what we're talking about. But so sales A is very busy talking to customers, and it's terrible. Sales people are not aware of the technology that exists that could make their life so much easier. It just doesn't occur to them to ask for help, because when they do, they often don't get help from revenue management. They get, just go out and sell at a higher rate. And so there's some history there that prevents us, perhaps, but you are spot on. The better sales leaders are the ones who are like, oh, I think there's quite a bit you could do to help me if only I shared with you what I was looking for. Hence, your earlier conversation, I focus a lot on getting salespeople to put on paper or on Excel or in some tool their customer segments so that they can share them with marketing and revenue management and tell them, go out and find me more of these people. These are my ideal customers. These are their challenges. Go out and find me some more. And typically, if you make that effort, at least recently, this hasn't always been the case, but in the last couple of months, marketing and revenue management are both a little bit more eager to step up and help. But honestly, for a long time, we didn't get any help, and so we were just like, fine, we'll do it ourselves. And as you were talking about the soft spot, I'm thinking to myself, the salesperson probably knew that one of the biggest employers or customers in town was having a tough time in their business, and so their need has shrunk, and that's why we're soft. Or I live in the city of Chandler, Arizona. I need to get a hotel here because we have so much business moving in that it would, as a salesperson, it would be a dream come true. I mean, there's just constantly companies expanding, and I don't know how you guys are getting that information in revenue management or in marketing, but it's going to have a huge impact on my hotel because next door, we just got 3 new companies that are bringing in 20,000 more employees. That's going to impact our numbers. And so, but it just really, it goes back to, it doesn't occur to people. They're busy in their day to day and their, tunnel vision. And so it doesn't always occur to them to go and see
You
how
think
else they're doing.
it's because we understand that marketing is all under that sales umbrella and they feel responsible for it. Therefore,
Yeah.
I'd add to your statement also the LinkedIn, depending upon the type of group business you're looking for in the sense of sales tools. Holly, you teach this on your class. I know, Ed, you're an expert in the usabilities of LinkedIn from what our discussions of things and so forth. But it is a phenomenal tool, to Holly's point, that if you can identify who it is you're looking for the type of business, it's a very good, sharp instrument to cull that down to the ability to message and dialogue and reach and connect with them.
In the B2B world,
if critical. No. I mean, listen, everyone's on LinkedIn now. I mean, so your Smurf group targets, those people are on LinkedIn. If you know what you're looking for, now normal LinkedIn search isn't that great. There's
Sales Navigator.
It's been so long. I forget that you know everything.
Sales Navigator. Sales Navigator that gives you access to absolutely everyone in LinkedIn and gives you really good capability to take a broad search and then narrow it by geo and things like that. You can find anyone on LinkedIn. If they are employed, chances are they have a LinkedIn profile.
And what's your SSI score, Ed? I'm curious.
I'm not going to talk about that. Get out of here.
Are we going to compare SSI scores?
I'd like to bring out an example that I bring in the Rocket discussion as to the usabilities between sales, marketing, and revenue management in a real case example. I had a hotel that lost group business 2 weeks out, 62% of their occupancy over a weekend. Okay. Just 2 weeks. And it was because of a tragedy. Okay. There were a repeat group block business that came every year. And yes, we could take the attrition, but the sales team said, look, this is a tragedy that created this. They've been with us every year. If we take the attrition, they're probably not going to come back with us. It's just a short-term money. That's it. So we went to revenue management, and I'm not going to speak for you in this sense, Lily, but the answers we got back were pretty much we have to drop our rate and hope there's residual demand. Or of course, that's going to put money on the table, blah, blah, blah. So Stephanie, what we did was we took 3 data sources. We took everybody that was on the books for that weekend and made it a custom audience in Facebook. And then we took everybody within 150 miles. And that was drive market because it was only 2 weeks out. We're past the flight window. And then the third was we went over and took everybody that was here at the same time last year. And we put all 3 of those custom audiences together, negated out the ones that were on the books so they wouldn't see what we're about to do, and just simply offered the group rate. We were to sell back out through, we sold out the block again. And that was just, it doesn't happen all the time, but that's where the 3 departments talking, collaborated and created this strategy. Marketing was able to go over and put a sharp point to the spear about it.
Yeah. The winners are the ones that talk. That's the thing we know for sure.
Are we going to compare scores now? Is that what we're going to do?
One
just
thing
to give you a basis point. I don't know if I've done this before, but that's just to give you a basis point what mine is.
I'm going to go see
yours is impressive. You're actually out there selling. That's impressive.
I'm 72 right now.
Yours is impressive too. I think I've gotten too complacent in my executive leadership.
Oh, Holly.
Holly's got it going.
Wow.
Better.
Wow.
This is what I do for a living.
So I was
I've
going
never
to say
had this
something on just to comment on what Holly was saying.
Hey,
The
Lily.
challenge that everybody is focused on their things, David. It's because their incentives aren't necessarily aligned
Yep.
with the revenue managers' incentives aren't aligned with marketing, aren't aligned with sales. So sales, it's like make your room night number, right? And just make that happen. Revenue management might be RevPAR, might be ADR, probably hopefully RevPAR, probably not GoPAR, but so it
Revenue
goes.
management is
Yeah.
forecast accuracy.
Yeah, well, yeah, it may have forecast accuracy too, but it should be also driving RevPAR, right? I mean, it's like, hey, we were perfect, and underachieving by 15% is not good, right? And then marketing, a lot of it is like, don't exceed your budget. You only have this much money. You've got your playpen, stay inside, don't do that. And those are conflicting objectives, and you wind up getting really, really bizarre stuff. Oh, and then you might have a management company whose objective is, we've got to achieve some sort of forecast, which ties into the revenue management being accurate. We've got to achieve some sort of percentage of of gross operating profit or something like that 2 out of the 3 years, or we get the deal terminated, right? So all of those things are not united across common goals. So
and it's because
again,
it's a lack of vision from the top.
absolutely.
I mean, it's what I
And that
normally
vision from
see.
the top goes, here's how we're going to do this. Here's how we're going to measure our performance. And so we need analytics, and we've got to make sure these systems are triggering certain analytics. So when we're talking about, how do you share this stuff? You shouldn't have to go to all those meetings, because you're looking at one common information set, but maybe from 4 different perspectives, which is fine. But at least you're all dealing from the
It goes back
same,
to our original
same
question.
thing.
Who should be asked the first question, or who should be asking the question of whom to get some sort of solution or dialogue? I'm going to do something. I built up a survey up. I don't know how it's going to represent on the screen, so I don't want to break anybody's concentration while we do this. But I'm going to pull it up and see what it looks like. I have no idea what it looks like. Oh, there we are. That's what it does. Happy days. So sorry we just blew away the screen.
Yeah.
But if we can keep talking while we see if anybody that's in our current audience that's on with us here, they won't be able to do it on the other platforms that we have on Facebook and so forth. But if somebody wants to just do a quick answer some of the questions along this line while we do this, I think I'll see if I can put the video back, I guess. Let's see.
Can we, Lauren, for those who are following along on LinkedIn, can we drop the link into the comments so they can jump in and take the poll?
I'll see what we can do on that.
Let's
Well,
do
I'm gonna
that,
go back
Lauren.
to the video. There,
we
I'm going to do that.
So
Also,
yeah.
there was a question earlier about sales tools besides Delphi. Did we address that for them?
I think we hit a couple of them.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we talked about
Salesforce. The biggest opportunity in sales tools that I see is sales proposal software. In addition to, if you're being a proactive seller, there's a whole bunch of tools that you should be using. But currently, everybody's using one of 2 products for their sales proposals, because they're the ones that interface. It's really just one Sendyne's product that interfaces with Delphi. But there are so many great sales proposals available with so much intelligence outside of the hospitality business that we're not taking advantage of.
Right.
That I wish people would.
And this is why, in my world, I'm dealing with enterprise that's trying to, figure out what they're going to do as a collection of properties and everything. And one of the big things I encourage all of them to do is to start focusing on owning your data layer. And the primary reason I tell them that they should own their data layer is so that they can eventually stop using hospitality specific technologies, and they can just use good technology.
Right.
Because if you look at why you would use an email marketing platform purpose built for the hotel industry, it's because of the PMS connection. If you look at why hotels are using booking engines that are, honestly, the strangest shopping cart experience I've ever seen, it's because of integration to the property management system. And so the penalty for that is pretty steep, because a lot of this technology that's available to hotels is minimum viable deployment to get them something remotely close to something that was done years ago in another industry. And it's because of the heavy weight that connecting and getting data brings on a vendor. It's one of the things I promised myself after selling Easy Yield is I would never get into a business again that required me to do connectivity to the property management system layer, because it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it at all. It slows you down on everything else you want to do. And
Two doesn't have that.
we don't connect to the PMS. I found other ways.
That's a very, very, very smart growth strategy. Alice did exactly the same thing, right? They went in and said,
"How is Alice doing?"
Their growth has slowed because now they've gotten to a point where they've got to start connecting to the PMS to make things happen more effectively. But because they've got to then integrate with the with the mobile app, and then that has to go in the PMS. So they've got to go in through the PMS because that's generally the
root
hook.
Of most of the technological dysfunction of our industry lies solely in the property management system vendors.
Absolutely, because their strategy was vendor lock-in.
Yep.
Right. That was the strategy. You get them on the platform, you make it proprietary, you make it miserable for them to go anywhere else or to connect to anything else. And if they do connect to anything else, you're going to get paid a ton of money for certification, and then you're going to monetize that by selling it to everybody who needs it. Right. So you're going to double dip on both sides. It's horrible. Yeah.
So the airline industry used to have this problem years ago before they switched over to having a centralized GRS via Amadeus. And so, as it relates to convergence, does anyone have any insight into how, if the airline industry does things better in terms of either convergence or organizational structure that prevents the silos better?
Well, no, airlines have monolithic structures. There is no owner, third-party management company brand. It's completely unified. And what happened with those, how were GDSs created? That was, we're talking way back. The airlines used to have ticket counters, and the Fifth Avenue, you would go up and down the street and you go, oh, there's El Al, and there's, whatever, Air France. That was Fifth Avenue right by Rockefeller Center, all the ticket offices. But then they figured out, because that's kind of like car dealerships, right? It was kind of a dealership type model. Then they figured out, we can get these agency groups out, and they can just have an agency relationship, and we'll pay them commission. We don't have to have all that real estate and everything, and they'll just book. And that's when the GDSs kind of existed as reservation systems, but then they made it to say, oh, where are you? You're external. And then they wound up having a commission basis. That was great. Then once they kind of consolidated after deregulation and kind of divvied up nonstop origin destination markets, they went, we don't need that. Why are we paying commissions? These guys are just taking orders, and they zeroed it out as an industry. So they've always behaved that way, and they've always behaved in lockstep. That their data's good. They develop the GDSs. They have MIDT, which are marketing information data tapes, which show all of the bookings of who went point to point, every single PNR, where they started, where they stopped, where they connected. But separately, because you wouldn't want to put them together, that would be anti-competitive. BIDT, which was the business information data tapes, because they were literally tapes, that had all the pricing information. And there aren't a lot of people who are buying whatever, a full fare coach ticket if a discounted ticket is available, right? So they had pretty much perfect information. That's ARC, that's owned by the airlines. IATA is controlled by the airlines. You go through the whole process. They created the GDSs, and now what's happening? They're doing NDC, which is their new distribution technology, and One Order, which is their unified itinerary. So guess what? One of the things I had in the news items was the McKinsey study, which you have to sign in for. But they sent it to me. It says, $40 billion of revenue. Guess what? 65% of that's like external product stuff. That's all hotel, folks. So guess who wants to own the traveler connection and monetize it? it's these unified airlines who also have a nice leading indicator. So I think they're going to start going, why should we sell our data to Adara and get the whatever? I think we'll just do it ourselves and get rid of the middleman, get rid of the marketing, and keep all that margin for ourselves. So that's the future, folks. Watch out.
And I guess the point I was trying to make, if we are supposed to learn from other industries as it relates to, outside of the technology piece, but specifically breaking down the silos of these disciplines, I feel like that's probably the closest one that has that specific revenue management model piece. So,
yeah, but the problem is they hold a monopoly.
And they hate customers.
Which completely changes the dynamic of how you price things.
Yeah.
They are monolithic organizations, so there aren't 3 to 4 different businesses inside of a business unit that all are misaligned. And like Robert said, most importantly, they hate customers. They're logistics companies, and customers are the things they move.
Right.
They're not interested in relationships or anything like that. It could be cattle that they're moving for all they care.
Remember that article, Robert, that we just read about the CFO talking about why they're putting more seats on airplanes? He totally was justifying it because then all the planes will be the same. And so what if you only get a foot of space on all of our planes? You're only going to have a foot of space. So that's why we're doing it. Isn't that a great idea?
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, those planes, and my dad spent 28 years with Boeing, right? So those planes were not designed to cram in that many people originally. I mean, certainly the payload of what it can carry, it will fly and everything. But what did they start doing? They said, used to have food service. Frontier Airlines used to serve, their big thing was steak and lobster, right? It was a really, really different experience now. But what did they do? They got rid of galleys. They got rid of
the padding on the back of their seats.
They stripped down they said it used to be, actually for a while, Midwest Airlines had, 2 and 2 seating of leather seats, which were nice and white. They served you warm chocolate chip cookies. I guess I'm picking on Frontier. Frontier acquired them and just killed it, right?
They put revenue managers in charge.
But all of that sort of stuff was great.
Gosh.
Well, they did. Well, no. There were no. Well, that was number one. Number two was it all started with. It started at American Airlines, and it started with an olive, because somebody went into Bob Crandall and said, "Hey, we're putting olives on the salad, and we're spending $184,000 a year or whatever. Nobody's on the airplane because of the olive." And the first domino tipped.
But again,
so I just have to jump in here, though. I have to jump in here to the comment about they put revenue management in charge. If you have a revenue manager who doesn't understand the concept of guest satisfaction being important to revenue management, or a relationship like the example of attrition not being charged in case of a disaster, if your revenue manager cannot wrap their heads around that and they make it all about 2 + 2 = 4, they are not a revenue manager. They are a finance person, and you need a new revenue manager now.
No, not for an airline.
Must understand
Absolutely not for an airline, though.
Airlines,
when you have divvied up origins and nonstop origin destination markets.
Just say it. Monopoly. When you have a monopoly, you don't have to care about satisfaction.
There's only 5 options.
There's a lack of choice. And with a lack of choice, satisfaction can be much lower.
So what you look at, an airline revenue manager right now looks at the origin destination market and goes, and now particularly with basic economy, American Airlines in Dallas can go, we're flying to Chicago. Basic economy will match the fare of Spirit Airlines. Full service economy will probably match the fare of Southwest. And that's just how they behave. Those fares line up to the penny. And so you wind up getting these really weird things. If Spirit is bottom feeding, you'll see $70, $90, $130 splits between basic economy and main cabin economy, which is nuts. That wasn't, everybody thought, well, it's a $30 difference because of the bag thing. These things are going really screwy. but that's what they do, and they don't really care. And then at some point they depart because they understand, go, you know what, here's what we can get, and we don't care if it winds up being lower. This is the optimum price, and it doesn't really matter because
Hey,
they know the
All right,
demand.
Robert, let
There's
them-
no
let
other
them
alternative, right?
Let them
So-
chime in.
Lily and Stephanie, did you guys go to Rock last year?
Yes.
I do.
Do you remember in the flash presentations, and Lauren, I know you were there, and Robert, I don't remember. Do you remember the guy, the revenue manager, who did the Cookie Monster theme?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was so mad about that because, and so please share with me what you think about that strategy that he was laying out. The cookies were customer service, and his point was you got to build for no shows. And if you let those pesky customer service scores drive your behavior, you're going to leave a ton of money on the table. And I
Absolutely.
thought,
That's the United Airlines. That's how United Airlines got into that situation. They didn't care. Maximize the revenue. And guess what? If the satisfaction scores are 20 points lower, it doesn't matter. The demand remains the same. They want to get from point A to point B. They want to fly. They don't want to drive. Right?
So it doesn't
That's
matter.
the reality. It doesn't matter.
So,
but it does matter in hotels. So
right. So
Really
Absolutely.
important.
Very
one
different
thing
business.
you can take from the airline industry, if you want to look at how a hotel can do better business by looking at the airline industry, that is to lobby your local government to shut down any further building of hotel rooms.
Absolutely.
That is the only benefit you can take away from anything the airline industry does, is limit the amount of competition that you will have in your market, and it will allow you to start operating more like an airline. Other than that,
Well,
airlines and hotels, the only thing they have in common is they're talking to the same person. But they are having two very different conversations. Airlines are having the conversation of, you know what, I don't care. Book with me, don't book with me. You're either going or you're not. And hotels are having a conversation of, please, for the love of God, stay with us. Those are two very different business dynamics.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the Cookie Monster thing that Holly had asked
Thank you.
about. I think that the intention was right, but the delivery was wrong, because you have to be able to take in some of those, I call them kind of like the soft skills, right? You have to understand, like, if somebody's parents died, they're not going to come stay at your hotel. And if you charge them, you're a monster. Like, sure, they might be lying, but if everybody's parents die in one day, then you might be a little suspect. But realistically, 70% of the time, they're going to tell you the truth, right? And it's not worth the extra 30% for one no-show fee or one late cancel fee. However, I also think that there's a major issue where there are the type of sales teams who come and say, you can't charge any of my customers because one time they looked at me out of the corner of their eye, and that means that they're going to bring us 5 pieces of business next year. Like, there has to be a balance between just like, oh, let's just give them everything and roll over on absolutely everything, and understanding like the intent of the customer. So I think it was a well-intentioned presentation, and there were some nuggets in there that were important, because we should be claiming revenue that people agreed to. But there are absolutely extenuating circumstances that come back to guest loyalty or things like that, or even, PR. I mean, we're just lucky that we're not like United, where, we get live video of people being dragged out of the hotel because we overbooked, So we overbook all the time, but luckily that's the flip side of the fact that we're not quite as hated as the airlines, let's be honest, in most cases. And so we don't get the PR around some of the decisions we make that honestly are not that much different.
I still think United should have run the marketing campaign of, we've come to kick ass and sell tickets.
Oh my gosh, did
Unfortunately,
you
we're
see
out
the
of tickets.
Southwest? Did you see the Southwest campaign after that? I
Oh,
forget
yes.
exactly what it was. It was something like, we won't kick you out, but it was pretty great.
and
Yeah.
Southwest is the one who's different. They get intense pressure from Wall Street to add bag fees, and they won't because they know they're hostile, and they look at it. And yes, they've added advanced, preferred boarding and things like that. And
but it's added value, not something you absolutely have.
Right. It's something. It's generally something that will give you a level of value, and they look and they go, you know what, somebody who's coming in, they want to do it. Not like basic economy where a family of 4, maybe with small children, can't do seat assignments, and they're going to be spread out in center seats across of. That's a really, really hostile situation. And what do? They go, yeah, those families need more bags. $30 a shot. There we go. Oh, if they want to sit together, that's going to be $25 a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Ugly stuff. But again, they look at it and go, you know what?
What else are they gonna do?
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine that's the revenue meetings. Let's just add this fee. Well, aren't you worried about anything else? What else are they gonna do? They're gonna drive? They're gonna get in a train? Come on.
Well, you know what though? Here's the thing with Southwest, and this is coming from a Southwest loyalist, which apparently can be done if you're a millennial. You can still be loyal to a brand.
Oh yeah.
So the thing is, I don't look anywhere else usually. And that's where they're getting me, right? I guarantee you, I have paid in some cases $50 or $100 more to fly Southwest because I don't have to price shop. However, I know that because I'm A-list, because I'm loyal to Southwest, I get a free companion pass wherever I go, which is worth a whole ton of money for me. And second of all, I get boarded within the first 60 people guaranteed. Right. So, well, with the exception of pre-board maybe. But, I'm basically getting everything that I want. I could have status with one of these other carriers and still struggle to get a window seat if I don't buy it at just the right time. With Southwest, I'm basically guaranteed a window seat because of my status. So these are the little things that are important to me.
But that's also, they're the little things that are...
Because I'm not comparison shopping now. And that is an excellent point of exactly how you take price out of the equation.
Right, but yes and no. Because again, you're oversimplifying it. For most routes, you have one or two choices.
Right.
So are you really, like, if you like Southwest, like I'm the same way, Southwest and JetBlue, they got me. Right. If they have a flight that is a direct flight to where I want to go, I'm booking them over Delta, United, American, Frontier, you name it. Okay. I will give them preference. However, I also know that most cities I go to, they're probably the one of two choices. So most of the time I don't even check because Delta is always more expensive. And I hate Delta. Like, I've never had a good experience with them.
I must be the only Southwest hater on here. I'm a Southwest hater. I will never fly Southwest if I can help it. Yeah.
Now, why do you hate Southwest? Who do you like? Who do you love? Oh, wait, you're in Seattle, Alaska.
Well, I've lived in 4 different states, so I've had status on 4 different airlines, none of which were Southwest. But I hate Southwest because of this. One, I won't pay for a seat. I'm anti-paying for a seat. And when I travel with my son, people avoid eye contact like the plague. It's like, oh my God, I have this really interesting magazine. Let me put it up to make sure you and your annoying son don't sit with me in the same row. God forbid he annoys me.
He's a German carrier.
I know. So
really,
who's your favorite carrier?
You hate the travelers.
You hate people.
Yeah.
Well,
but
they forced me in that situation.
They don't want to sit next to a child.
But they forced me into this whole I have this anxiety about not knowing what seat I'm going to sit in until I get on the plane. They forced me in that scenario because I won't pay for a seat. So
you can't pay for
you can't pay for a seat
in Southwest at all. So
that means I'm in the middle.
The other ones are forcing you to
check in 24 hours in advance, Stephanie. That's all you got to do.
Or pay to check in 24 hours in advance.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Check in 24 hours in advance.
Thank you.
You must not live in a primary market for Southwest. In Orlando, if you don't buy early bird check-in, you are C. Yeah. You can check in 1 second past. And you are C.
There's a lot of automation that all the corporate.
A-list.
Yeah.
They
A-list
pulled
and
the
corporate
first
automation.
30 seats for A-list.
Yeah.
But regardless, I kind of feel like now we're talking about the airlines and we're not talking about the convergence of revenue marketing and sales, and that's what everybody's here for. So I think we should reel it back in
Good
here.
job. Brought us back in.
Wow,
Yay,
that is,
Lily.
wait a second, that has never happened on this show before. I think we have, what show number 227, Lauren? I think we have a milestone here. Wow.
Well, only if it happens.
Oh, and
There's
Lauren's
many
muted.
attempts.
Oh,
There's
wait,
many
Lauren's
attempts
muted.
to
That's
reel
why
us
we're
in.
on track. Yeah.
Okay, so to bring it on
Still
track,
muted.
I'm gonna ask. I have one of the questions that we had talked about, like positioning. Like, how should we be interacting, and in what frequency should we be interacting? So I want to throw that question out there, Holly, if you want to take it, or what would be your wish list from us in terms of how that communication or how that interaction, what would that look like in a perfect world?
So, that is such a good question. My immediate response is, look, can't you just send me a report? Because I really don't want to sit down with a revenue manager. And so I think before you even get there, somehow you've got to figure out how each silo shows their value and what their value could be to the other silos. Because I would love to sit down with a revenue manager if I knew how they could make my life better. I'd sit down with them, once a week at the most, if that's what they wanted.
At the moment.
But until I understand what they're going to bring to the table, I know you're going to have, and it's the same with revenue managers. They're busy too. What do they want to talk to a salesperson for? And we can show what value we can bring.
Holly, two things. Number one, I'm learning through this conversation how much you secretly hate me. Number two,
You're disciplined.
It's not.
He doesn't hate you.
Lily.
He just hates everything you've dedicated your life towards. I mean,
but number
let's be
two,
clear.
I do not necessarily disagree with Holly here, because I think that in the relationship between sales and revenue, there's one thing between all three, right? We all need to be aligned in the same strategy, the same revenue targets, the same ADR targets beyond just occupancy, etc. As long as that's in place, we should be able to generate a very easy report that every sales manager can have at their desk that shows them the limitation of how many rooms they can sell on a given day and at what maximum or minimum rate they can sell. And I will say that it's not always us saying raise your rates. Sometimes I have salespeople out there selling a 10-room group at bar, and then they want to know why we're not protecting it later by raising bar to be $70 over what the comp set's charging. And I'm like, because you put it in too high. I can't protect 10 rooms in a 250-room hotel. So I think that you need a max and a minimum, not just this MAR thing from the 90s, right? We need a maximum and minimum so they have a range to work with. They know how many rooms they can sell. And if it falls within the parameters that revenue management has set, which it's our job to analyze and make sure that's in line with the overall strategy of the hotel for the combination of transit and group, then they shouldn't have to run to us for every single DBR. They should be able to answer that customer on the phone, have the proposal out in 5 seconds, and capture the business.
Hey, quick question. Do you know if anybody that still can manually figure out displacement value?
I'm sorry. No, what?
Do you know of anybody that can send a meeting and manually calculate displacement cost on a group proposal?
No,
I
not
can.
Yeah, it's a lost art.
Absolutely. And that's huge.
why in a meeting without the proper metrics. You need to pull together the proper metrics if you're going to do a displacement. But you should at least know where your demand forecast is. If your demand is only going to get you to 60% on a certain day and that group is 30%, you should know that off the top of your head. But the exact displacement value requires specific analytics, and for large pieces of business, it's worth taking it back and calculating that. So I think that's an area where revenue management.
Well, I bring that up as a particular example because in the live world of meetings like this, and to Holly's point, revenue managements tend to be intimidating in the sense that they have their strategy. They have their plan, their methodology, and it's, dang it, their sandbox. Okay? And when you sit down in a meeting and you're proposing things, whether it's a sales pitch proposal, whatever like this, the first pushback is, well, what's that going to do for our current occupancy demand for that day? What's the displacement value that you're saying this is going to create for us? What's the ancillary value to these things? And if they don't have those answers, it's a get back situation. You never get back. And so that's the problem. You need to be able to come to a meeting with the knowledge of what you're proposing as it occurs against what revenue management is doing. And the only way that that really truly works is revenue management sharing what their expectations are in enough of a detail that the numbers, as you point out, the information is there for them to use and create that answer. And because a lot of times there is this push around of those kind of conversations, because heck, we all have different responsibilities. We're trying to create that common communication, but these are the little things. These are the little bumps in the road that happen. Marketing comes, and any marketer that comes to revenue management asking what the deal is should be shot. To Ed's earlier point, it's not a rate issue of discount, as you point out, Lily. It's a strategy of who we're going after. The questions that marketing is coming to revenue with is, where is it that you are looking at that I need to be knowing, I need to be paying more attention to? This is what I'm producing, but where is it that it's not producing enough? And that's a dialogue that comes through. And then sales gets brought in with hey, I know somebody that needs somebody like that down a period. I can bring this kind of business to that or not. And that's when you start getting the dynamic going. My solution is converging sales and revenue management.
Yeah.
Oh no, you gotta look at the
I-
graphic.
I-
The graphic that Ed
I put a
shared.
graphic
Quite
up
good.
on how to make the
Yeah, there you go.
So,
But I think it comes back to what I think it was Ed, what you were saying. The solution is not more meetings. I don't think sales and revenue need to sit down once a week, other than in a strategy meeting that actually is accomplishing something and not reading a star report out loud.
right.
If you're going to focus on the star report, it should be for 5 minutes about what did we do well that we want to continue? What did we not do well that we never want to do again or want to start doing? Let's move on. Let's apply this strategy moving forward, so that it's actually worth everybody's time to be in that meeting. Whether, I post a lot of things where I don't actually write the articles, so I don't also necessarily agree that marketing needs to be in every single weekly meeting. I think once a month is usually good for marketing, but stop wasting people's times. Make your meetings shorter, to the point, and make them worth something.
Well, I'll even add another little wrinkle. Don't hand out an agenda as you walk in the door.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, have your reports out early. And for those people attending, read them. If somebody's actually giving you the reports in advance, there's a reason for it.
there again, read them, but I'm only going to take my time to read it if I know what the value is going to be to me.
Right.
And so that's what I really
You will
feel
continue
like.
to be employed because
Yeah.
your business will have enough.
No, that's not
success
true. If I
continue
spend
to
all my
employ.
time reading these analytical reports, which may or may not be my thing,
You're not doing your job.
yeah, I'm not building my relationships.
But this is also where I kind of feel like you all need to go to lunch together every now and then.
No,
So
but
maybe
that's
you
not-
don't need a
That's not the
meeting.
answer either. So seriously, that's what people have been saying for a long time. But I really, and a lot of this started not long ago, Lily, with something that you said when I asked you what your KPIs are, because I didn't even really know. And you said forecast accuracy. Now, we all should be measured on RevPAR index changes, I think. Like, that should be a common goal that everybody gets measured and bonused or whatever it on. But forecast accuracy, I really think could be a project for a hotel or a management company, where if you said to marketing, revenue management, and sales, if you guys can have a forecast with X degree of accuracy, as a team, you get something. Like, that's your incentive. Figure out how to get it done. I think that's the way. I think start picking some goals, incentivizing. Salespeople do, in fact, respond to some incentives because we're used to it. But make it an incentive that isn't going to be good for one and bad for the other. Then you're going to start looking. I really have delved into this forecast thing. I'm into it now in a big way, which in the past, I was always like, whatever, I don't know, we'll see. This is, because I hate the question, is this group going to go definite? I believe that they're going to go definite, or I wouldn't have it on the list.
Ooh, there are a lot of people who do.
I know. So that's what I'm saying. So give me a reason to focus more on forecast accuracy. And you know what I would have found out, which is something that I have found out only in the last month? My sales close rate, a signal is how much email correspondence I have with the customer. If I see an upswing in email correspondence from the customer, I'm more likely to close.
Right.
I never paid attention to that.
So
Like I said, that was a signal until I
Well,
started.
there's
paying
that,
attention.
and the group pickup also though is also a big one too, right?
No, I'm
Is
talking
it going
about
to go
before
to?
then.
Oh no, yeah, no. I'm saying, yeah. One is it going to go definite? Then the other is it going to really pick up those rooms, right?
Yeah.
But you
And
say
again,
that
revenue management is also making a lot of that trickier because if they're dumping a bunch of rates into, distress channels like Hotwire, and people can figure out it's the same hotel and they can save $40, all of a
You're on a
sudden the
different
group
issue.
pickup drops
right.
and the hotel comes
But-
in and
But that also
you,
goes to marketing. That goes to marketing as well. All of a sudden, our direct
Absolutely.
channel goes from hero to zero because what we're pushing on direct channel gets bled out because rate parity went to heck because revenue management wanted to pull the trigger to hit a different number that we didn't know about. So it is a wrinkle in the sense of
Absolutely.
day-to-day logistics. When revenue management wants to steer the boat, they got to let everybody know so we don't we fasten our seatbelts so we can
Which we're going to
turn down.
figure out is an issue if we're talking about forecast accuracy. We're going to look at all the factors that contribute to the forecast not being accurate. And we got to go back within our own disciplines and see what signals there are and why and how we can improve those. And I think it's a great start. Stephanie, what do you think though from a marketing standpoint?
Well, I mean, something Lauren said just triggered like, there's nothing worse when like the salesperson was like, oh, we need to, dump more money in Expedia travel ads. And then after the fact, I realized that revenue management had already turned on an agency promotion and an accelerator promotion. And I'm like, oh my God, like, like we're paying the man like 5 times, but,
wait a second, your sort order is going to rise. Your positioning is going to be quite good.
So that's just I've been in that scenario a couple of times, just the people not, all of us not talking. But
the other thing I was going to say on the forecast accuracy though, you can't just let the revenue managers run wild either, because again, if they're doing that, they may start again, the end of the quarter, the end of the year, whatever, let's make sure I'm accurate on my forecast, not necessarily, you know what? I forecast too low. And it's like, wow, we could be 20% higher. Let's not make that happen. Is a bad scenario.
Well,
right?
but this is where Holly dismissed it very quickly. But really, like professionally, if you want to be successful, understand what the people around you are doing, what they care about. If you are operating inside a business and you have absolutely no understanding of your peers who also may control part of your success, you're the problem. If you don't ask those questions,
I think you're putting the ownership on the individual. I mean, I think that a lot of that is dictated by company culture. I work with a lot of different management companies and different capacities, and I can tell you there is a lot of thought processes like swim in your own lane from an efficient, because it makes it the most efficient. Not that they don't believe in cross training or cross communication, but they feel like if you just focus on your thing, less meetings, yada yada, it's going to be the most efficient route. So swim in your own lane. And I've been told that more times than I like to jump over in Lily's cube or to Holly's cube, and they're like, this isn't what you do. And I said, I'm not saying I have the answer, but I say I want to ask the question so that we can know where to go from here.
I want to circle back to Holly's question, which is the question I normally get from sales. What's in it for me if I forecast accurately? And really, it's your ability to book more groups. Because if you assume that just because it's in the pipeline, it's going to close because you want to look good in front of the owners, and you tell me that as a revenue manager, I'm going to go ahead and forecast that piece of business and shut down that day to other groups that
Yep.
might have actually closed because I'm getting bad information. It's my job to control the strategy, make sure there's the right balance of group and transient. So when it comes to the sales team forecasting accurately what their pipeline is going to do, that's what I come back to. I just had a great conversation actually with a sales manager the other day, a director of sales, who was doing a forecast, and she had never really been responsible for it before. And I had kind of put it on her plate like, hey, here's the thing, I can try to forecast, but you have the pulse on your business and you're going to probably do it better. So because that particular owner was very cognizant of drops in forecast, she came in a little bit on the low side. So I was like, okay, I'm going to challenge you as if I'm the owner here, because you're going to need to answer for this. I said, so this is not necessarily coming from me, but my job is to validate your forecast before we submit it. That's how I have your back. It may sound like I'm challenging you because I don't believe you or I don't think you're doing well enough, but let's have a discussion here, because if I send you all the tough questions and you can answer them for me with data, which is the same way an owner is going to look at it, then you're going to be prepared for that meeting. I'm going to feel confident that I'm moving forward with the right forecast, which means I can layer in transient on top of it correctly. And at the end of the day, now we have a collaborative, convergent discussion between sales and revenue on forecasting accuracy that's good for both parties.
And you have a salesperson who feels some ownership for
Right.
the forecasting without a threat, because you're there to help. And what's in it for her is she does look good in front of the owner.
And I really appreciated
That's
that
how
she, yeah,
And
she
most would be
understood
lovely.
and listened.
That's better.
Yeah, she understood, she listened, she was part of the conversation. She didn't immediately get defensive, which I think is a big problem between these departments. Everybody assumes that because you're asking a question and you're trying to blame something on them. And it's, you know, in some cases, sure, people are like that. But in many cases, it's really not about that. And from our perspective, you know, we don't always use the flowery language in revenue management. We like bullet points. We want to get to the point, move on with our lives. We have other things to do. Other people want to talk about their kids or what they did this past weekend. And sometimes when we skip over that, they feel a little bit, you know, put down. But I think if you understand the language and the communication style of your other departments, that goes a long way too, because you have to always approach people in their language. Never assume that they're going to adjust to yours.
I think that's a huge point. And I think marketers are very bad about using their world of acronyms and then going and speaking to whatever acronyms to sales and revenue management, and they're not speaking the proper and understandable language.
And
Nobody do that.
like Lily, what you just said was like probably the most correct thing I think has ever been said on this show. Which is,
That's a pretty low bar,
I
but
expect
still
that
we
to
can make
start.
it for
You
it.
really need to raise the bar.
I mean, but it's so true. And it's something that, you know, goes beyond hospitality, which is it is easier to bend to the people around you than to try and have everyone bend to you. And a lot of the problems that I think do exist in these departments ending up in silos is, sure, you were forced in that silo. I completely accept that you were forced in that silo. However, if you want more for yourself, if you want more for the people around you, if you want more for the business you're working with, you do need to find a way to be better, to not just hold your spot in market. How can you be better? Because if you figure that out, you're either moving up or moving on, but both will be positive.
Yep.
You know, and you know, don't stay in your lane. Stay in your lane corporately. Find a way to get out of your lane. Because if you don't understand what's going on around you, you're not bettering yourself, and you're not bettering the business you're working with.
So one of the questions that we get solicited from people when we reached out earlier, but prior to the show, asking if people had any insight, one of the questions was, "What is the first step from any department's perspective? What, you know, olive branch, data, dialogue. What is the first step perspective from any of the disciplines as to how do you create that crossover conversation to start?"
Care.
I like to go to the team and like go to the revenue manager and say, tell me, you know, give me an underperforming hotel and tell me what the problems are. And that's usually an answer that they can answer with somewhat ease. And then bringing in the sales team and aligning that with the target market and segment and say, okay, these are the tools I have in my toolbox to help you achieve XYZ, so that it selfishly helps both of them potentially. Or usually I have tools to help each one of those different acquisition models. So it's just helping them solve their problems.
What do you think, Holly?
I would say, honestly, to start, communicate that it's your goal that we break down these silos, make sure that everybody understands what your intentions are in this and, sort of where you're heading to. But as a first step, I literally would pick a common goal and ask your folks to work on it together and to come up with, and it could be the accurate forecast. It could be the RevPAR index change. It could be conversions on your website. I actually think that would be a cool joint goal because it would force sales to communicate their target audience, which I don't think they always do. So I would literally start out by picking one common goal that the three entities can share and encourage them to work together to come up with a solution. That's probably where I would start. And as they're doing that, hopefully they're going to start to understand what the other departments do and expand their relationship. But it's a tangible way to get started tomorrow that gives you some sort of output.
From my perspective, I recommend that you get everybody together in the banquet room and do trust falls. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I think that, what it really comes down to, and I'm going to go a little psychology on you guys here, but that's what it comes down to, I think, is that everybody's worried, am I going to get thrown under the bus? That's what people are worried about, I think, in these three areas in a lot of cases, because whenever there's a revenue problem, which all of us contribute to revenue, I don't mean revenue management problem, I mean, money problem. Everybody likes to be quick to point fingers because they're feeling defensive, and we can't be doing that between these three departments. So the first thing is having each other's backs. Even if it is somebody's fault, it's everybody's fault. Everybody needs to accept team responsibility. And to me, making the responsibility a team responsibility is one of the first steps, which comes back to using similar KPIs, creating similar goals and bonus structures for the departments, and really, as a leader, whether it's a chief commercial officer, a GM, or anybody else, not allowing it to be, oh, well, revenue management wouldn't let me do this, or marketing, should have put out a promotion about this. That conversation is not productive. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop being defensive. We've got to work together and all assume responsibility and say, okay, this may have fallen more or less in one department, but what is my responsibility within this problem? How can I self-examine and find out and put forward what could I have done better, whether it was supporting my team or doing something in my own area?
Well, I want to be mindful of the fact that we have always something to talk about when it comes to this, because this is a never-ending conversation as to the value and everything like this. We are almost at a 2-hour mark. And thank you for all those who are staying in attendance with us, both on this platform and on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and a few other places, and YouTube. And if any closing comments in association with this, I believe obviously we have to bring this topic back to the conversation point again. We have to have yet another show about convergence. I think we can continue the conversation with the applicability of some of this, and I'll send out a survey link to everyone that was in participation if they have any additional feedbacks from their perspective on our conversation today. But from a closing position, if you were to give points of advice as to, you mentioned this is the first step, these are the things, but what is the value proposition? What's the light at the end of the tunnel for this? We talked that there's obviously an improvement of each individual department if they had more of an in-tune perspective of the others, but how is that measured? What is the real value proposition that we're proposing making all this effort for? And then after that, we want to talk about a little bit about HSMI stuff, And if we want to throw in just Robert's Rock, since he was so generous in making a list that we never got to, which he always does every week faithfully. But if we wanted to start, Holly, do you want to start first, but just go from that perspective?
So really the benefit to the light, I think, is personal growth. You would be amazed once you start to learn about what other departments are doing, how much easier and better your own life can be. I just put 2 links up there on the HSMAI front. We're doing a free webinar that talks about the value of the digital marketing certification. I think that most non-marketing people who have taken this certification have been just overjoyed at the information that they've learned that they never knew was available. To your point earlier, Lauren, like, why don't you ask for help? You don't even know that it's possible. So I think learning is the benefit in the end to your personal and professional growth. The second link that I'm putting up there is I did want to drop the announcement since the deal has been signed officially.
And your co-host.
What was that?
Your co-host is in the audience with us.
Oh,
Mr.
good. Dan Waxman with Sasso and myself and HSMAI are launching a 6-part web series that's going to be 6 weeks for an hour every week around the digital marketing certification study guide and then some. So if you want to get certified, you can take the class and then take the test. If you have no interest in a certification, but you just want to learn what digital marketing does, you can take the class. And the first one is February the 3rd, I think. We're going to do them periodically throughout the years. They're going to be live. Dan and I will facilitate them online. And I think it's going to be phenomenal. I hope. So that's my closing. Learn.
Lily, what would you like to say?
I think there's a couple key things that I would hope that people would take away from today. Number 1, know your target demographic and do not compete on price, compete on value. Create aligned goals between all 3 departments so that somebody's not bonused on doing something that would actually hurt the strategy of the other department. And then think through your strategies and think, will this strategy create sustainable, profitable progress for my hotel?
Hey, Stephanie, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna put the little Stephanie thing up just so you don't freak out then.
Okay. No, I mean, I think both recaps were good. Aligning understanding who your target markets and segments are. But if I just want to give one other actionable thing that to kind of pull things together or give you an opportunity for convergence, I would say as marketers, challenge yourself, to understand the goals of the other disciplines. But I would say specifically asking the sales plan for a copy of their marketing plan and seeing, from a strategy standpoint, if there's ways that you can align your marketing efforts with their sales plan throughout the year and trying to revisit that on a more regular basis. I mean, most sales plans should be done for, 2020 and hopefully longer, but revisiting that on a regular basis to ensure alignment is maybe another, tangible opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Ed and Mr. Robert, any additional contribution to the cause of the convergence conversation?
I was going to let you go, Robert.
I
was being polite.
I learned a lot. I mean, Ed, I think we've been doing stuff so wrong. I mean, normally Ed and I had a very similar approach. I mean, we did it kind of through movies. You'd show the salespeople Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, right?
Oh,
Coffee is for closers, right? You show the revenue management guys like Office Space. You are producing TPS reports. Mm-hmm. That's what you do. And then, of course, marketing, you show them Jerry Maguire. It's like, show me the money. I don't know. You keep them in silos and you just let them run, right? It's called, it's really mushroom. I kind of look at it as mushroom management. You keep them in the dark. Every once in a while, you open the door and you throw some shit on them, That doesn't work as well. I don't know. But,
All right, everything just got unraveled and done. Thank you so much for 2 hours at the end.
That's fantastic.
so in closing, you can either do it that way or maybe listen to what these guys are saying. They might have some good ideas.
Yeah, they might have some good ideas. We do hope that we'll bring the conversation back up in the same format of you guys lead the charge on it. The to Holly's point, I'm sorry, Ed, I'm interrupting you. You wanted to do a close.
Well, were you going to do a close?
I was just going to point out some of the links and some of that stuff, so we're all good.
Okay, well then I'll do a close. Jeez. My biggest recommendation, because I hear it screaming through these stories that you're all telling, is by golly, please become curious about how your business works. It's my only secret to my success in life is I asked questions to find problems, and then I fixed them, and then I sold them. I mean, it's
then you made them someone else's problem.
Seriously, become curious. Find out why Lily is, caring and talking about the things she's caring and talking about. Find out why Holly has such a negative spin to Lily. Find out why Stephanie, who appears to already have mastered the convergence thing, is somehow entertaining us with these petty stories of how we can't get along. I mean, seriously, become curious. Do it yourself. Don't wait for someone to tell you to do this. Take interest in the things that are happening around you. You will find convergence happens naturally because people don't want to be left out in the cold, trying to fight for their own thing. Like people would much prefer to succeed or die as a group than as an individual. So just start learning around you.
Mm-hmm.
Sage advice.
Thank you, Lou, for putting those things in. And also, all the information associated with all the co-hosts today will be available in the show notes that will be available at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. Also on the replays that will be rescheduled for all of the platforms that we're on. There is a follow podcast to this as well. Obviously, from our discussions, we do this in support of HSMAI and their efforts to bring this type of content to market. And we were generous. They were generous enough that we were able to simulcast on the mothership today. With HSMAI, along with both the APAC and EU versions of HSMAI as well. So we're literally distributed globally by HSMAI for the show today. So thank them for that. And in tune with that, don't forget that the Adrian Awards are coming up in January in New York City, which is kind of like the Oscars for marketing for hospitality. One of our normal co-hosts, Stuart Butler, is a recipient of 7 of those awards, of which one of them is for his podcast. And he's in the running potentially to get a platinum for. We'll see what goes with that, because for those who aren't familiar with his podcast, Fuel Travel, it is a phenomenally excellent podcast and highly recommended. This isn't the only show that you can get great content from. Mr. Tim Peter, who didn't get to join us today, who was in the chat room for a little while, he has an excellent podcast. So Thinking Out Loud. Which is a more shortened version of 15 to 20 minutes, but is very concise and very insightful. I can't recommend it enough. Ed doesn't toot his own horn near as much as he should, but Flip2, the platform and its usabilities is a whole new perspective on your guest engagement and your guest communication. Holly's influencer sales, which she didn't also push very hard on. She's pushing her webinar and so forth with HSMAI, but the sales program that she has for training online is absolutely phenomenal in the ability for salespeople to better define their communication skills and to answer some of the questions that were brought into the chat room on what tools are out there. And there's a whole mountain of tools out there that they try to look for the silver bullet, but sometimes you can assemble a pretty good gun with bits and pieces of other stuff. So Robert doesn't do much, so we can't really talk too much about it.
I produce a list of news topics every week that generally don't get looked at.
Hey, Robert, I read every article, and why don't you put that on a blog so that...
Robert,
I know, I need to...
By the way, there are companies who charge for that kind of stuff.
I wasn't going to say that, but...
I
am migrating off of the HSMAI Marketing Advisory Board, I guess, as of December 31st. So
I already took you off the website, dude. You're gone. You're history.
Oh yeah, I know. They kicked me to the curb early. So so I don't know. I may not be distributing them anymore. So I may have to go send it other places, other ways. I don't know.
I've been asked that what is the annual book for that? They would like because that is literally a testament of time travel through the entire year. Because every week you have a curated list. It's a great recycle to that.
I have a revenue management strategy for that. $3.5 million. I only need to sell one. Right? Is that good, Lily? Would that work?
Hey, that's the Focusrite strategy.
No.
Okay.
Hey, Focusrite
the
sells
strategy.
1,600 of those $4,000.
I know, amazing. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's not forget on Stephanie. For those people, there's always a conversation. The first question usually comes out: are you branded or independent? And there's not a lot of people in the space that know how to handle branded hotels because you have to be familiar with all the metrics associated with each brand. And so Stephanie's a bit of a unicorn because she knows how to handle multiple platforms. So if you're a Hyatt, a Hilton, a IHG, or Marriott product, she knows what they can offer you and how to yield it rather than going, oh, sure, I know a little bit about that. And then they tear apart the engine to find out it was a spring. She can do that. Plus, also, if you flip it independent, she can run that way too. So by all means, this is the caliber and the talent of the conversation we had today as to why these perspectives were so loyal to that process. But again, HSMI Adrian Awards, also the digital market. Well, no, it's no longer that called. The marketing conference is now.
Marketing Strategy Conference. Marketing Strategy Conference.
Thank you for being clear on that. Is adjacent to the Adrian Awards, which is January 22nd, 23rd. No, 27th, sorry. And that link has also been put into the chat window and it'll be also in the show notes as well. I think from Tim's comment in the chat room, he's going to be joining us next week. You'll see most of us, given we're the regular co-hosts on a regular basis. So if you have more questions about what we talked about today or insights or any opinions about these things, you can send me an email at info@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com or Lauren at, and if it's directed to any of the individuals here, if you don't already have their email or link to their different provided services, I'll make sure that they get the email. And if you watch any of the replays, if you comment in the chat room, I will make sure I answer those chats as well. So I think I've covered all the bases with everything. Thank you very much, everyone, for the time and participation today. And Robert always be closing. Yeah. And to that end, I think we're about ready to shut everything off. Thank you. Unless there's any other closing comments, I think we're good until show number 228 next week, 11:30 Eastern. Same bat time, same bat channel.
So now you can hit the red stop, Ed.
Yeah, you hit the green start. Hit the red.
All right, I'll not pause. Stop.
No, just hit stop.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right, I stopped the session, but did not kick you all out.
I gotta go. I have a class in 20 minutes. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
I gotta get my audio working before my class. Yeah.
Yeah,
Glad we fixed that. Yeah.
Eventually.
It got fixed. It just got to. But thank you, everybody. That was
Yeah, it was a good one.
that was a really good show.
It was very nicely done.
Premature start, but hey.
Holly really dislikes you, Lily.